I made a game in a week completely alone for the Brackeys Game Jam. If you saw my last video where I made a management game with cats, I had a whole team of 5 other people, but now I'll have to handle everything about the game, from the coding, art to music and sound effects. Anyway, let's get to the game. So the theme was calm before the storm. I already had an idea, a farming game where you have to fight your own plants. So it would basically be a reverse Plants vs Zombies, but it will also be a top-down shooter similar to Enter the Gungeon. The game would be split into 2 parts. The calm part being where you have to plant the crops, and the storm being the part where you have to fight the plants. This was an idea I had for a game way before, but I just never actually got to work on it. I always start with getting some art for the player and made a little farmer and his gun. Initially I had a pitchfork, but I abandoned that. Got the top-down player movement working now, and I tried to make the game pixel perfect, but there were so many visual glitches because of this. But don't mind it for now. But I got bullets coming out of the gun as well, and the player can aim too, so you can see the gun rotating around the player. And added a little recoil animation when you're shooting. And I put together the tile map for the game, a lot of grass with some patches to put crops on. But what is the point of having a gun if there's nothing to shoot? So I started to work on the enemy textures, and I decided to go for 3 for now: the tomato, carrot, and corn. And I really liked the carrot, so I started with him, made a little walk cycle animation, and tried to make him move around with Godot's built-in AI pathfinding, which was surprisingly easy to use. And now the carrot walks towards the player, and I can reuse this code on other enemies too. So I quickly added the tomato in, which is supposed to be a basic enemy that hurts when it touches you. And everything except the tomato should have unique behaviors, and the one I have in mind for the carrot is to make it launch itself like a rocket to the player. But I don't have any proof of me attempting this. I did make some texture earlier and try to make it work in the game, but I just couldn't get it to work, and I decided to abandon that and go for something simple, like just making it shoot out carrots. This was a lot simpler since all I had to do was copy the player's bullet and make it only collide with the player and make a carrot texture for it. And now I have to make the carrot shoot it, and oh god, forgot to put a delay between the shots, but anyway, now that's fixed. Oh, and I also abandoned using the pixel perfect effect for the game because of this weird jitter. Pretty sure there are fixes for this, but I don't think I want to spend my limited time to make the visuals look perfect. And I also want to mention that I have 3 days of university in between the submission time, so I have much less time to work with. Anyway, with the time I had left, I added gun stats, which can be customized. So now I can make very strong guns or very weak ones. I'll show you what I'm going to use it for later. But now you can adjust the damage, accuracy, piercing, and many other stuff. Mainly I wanted to get the bullet count stats so I could do this. And there should also be a way for the player to plant crops as well, so I made a little preview that shows what crop you're selecting, and actually made it set the crop you're hovering over. Also, you may notice that the player isn't holding the gun and it's over there. Well, this is just a calm period I was talking about earlier. And once you're done planting crops, just pick up the gun and the round will start. I really like the idea of players choosing the difficulty being a part of the actual gameplay rather than some setting that you set at the start of the game. And also the player isn't allowed to start the game without planting at least 1 crop first. I also plan this to be a roguelike game, and like I mentioned earlier, this is very much inspired by Enter the Gungeon, another roguelike shooter. But yeah, this next enemy will show you why it's similar. I feel like the enemies so far have been a little too easy. Just look at how I'm juking them the whole time. I had to spice things up a bit with a little more difficulty. With the corn, which explodes into multiple bits of popcorn when killed. And that is literally a copy of this guy from Enter the Gungeon. But the player does get rewarded for facing harder enemies. I added a little thing to show the player's money, but choosing easier plants will be less rewarding. but the more difficult ones like the corn will give you a lot more. But I'll get to what money can be used for later. Anyway, here's a little clip of me fighting every enemy I've added. Now remember when I added stats for the gun? Since this is a roguelike, there has to be some sort of power scaling for the player, right? So that's why I'm making the upgrade system. Basically, after every fight, a shop will pop up presenting 3 upgrades that will last for the entire run. You will be able to get these with the money you earned, and you could even get more than one at a time if you earn enough money. But this was a bit of a headache to code. There's still many things I didn't understand about Godot, but after a long while I managed to get it working. And I really love roguelikes that let you go a little off the rails, a little too overpowered, like Slay the Spire, one of my favorite games of all time, where you build a deck of cards to kill monsters until you reach the top of the spire. If you are very skilled at the game, you are completely allowed to break the game and build an overpowered deck, and it's the most satisfying thing about playing the game. And yet, somehow the game is very balanced. Building overpowered decks require a really good amount of skill. The same thing about the 2024 indie hit and my personal game of the year, Balatro, which is poker but a roguelike that allows you to do the same thing. People have broken the game so hard that the game cannot even comprehend the numbers anymore. It's just so much fun. But yeah, I won't be able to replicate this perfectly in my game since that needs constant iteration and rebalancing to get everything just right. But I could try, and you can make crazy good guns now that can shred through hordes in seconds. You just need to know what the right upgrades are for your build. And a common way how games balance these overpowered strats is by introducing bosses that are really strong and make you plan ahead of reaching them. But I'll get to that. The upgrade system is working really well, and I can easily add more upgrades and rebalance if I wanted to. The prices also go up every round. I also added a heal button that also gets more expensive as you buy, since there was no other way for the player to heal. And that's it. So I improved the overall UI in the game, and you probably noticed the hotbar at the bottom shows icons for the plants rather than names of the plants. And also added a health bar for the player. I actually got all of these UI assets from someone else, made by this guy, and I credited them in the game. And yeah, I only took other assets because I didn't want to work on UI assets again. It's really annoying. And we're also getting really close right before the submissions end. So right now I'll be working on the progression. You may have noticed on the top that there's some text saying stages. And it's exactly what you think. There will be 10 stages in the game. You start the stage by picking up the gun and starting the fight, then end it by killing all the plants. I also made it so that plants are now locked behind certain stages. So you start with the basic tomato, and then on stage 2 you get the carrot, and on stage 5 you get the corn. And this was one of the best decisions I made in the design for this game, and you'll see why later. But of course, the last stage has to be special, and that's why I started to work on a boss battle. The boss will be this pumpkin right here. He's gonna be the biggest threat in the game, the final boss. And man, it was such a pain to code. I spent so long making this boss fight, mostly fixing things rather than adding new stuff. But basically, when you finish stage 9, all the crops that you have unlocked so far will be gone, and there will only be one option, the pumpkin. And I also made it so that you can only place one pumpkin down so nobody will accidentally spawn an army of bosses. But now let's get into how the pumpkin actually works. I made an animation for it to jump and land as soon as it spawns. It would jump up and land on the player doing massive damage. You get a little heads up by the shadow that pops up right where the pumpkin would actually land. And the pumpkin has 6 different moves. It will randomly pick the first 3 when it has over 50% health, and randomly pick the other 3 when it's below. So I can make the boss a lot stronger the further you progress the battle. And of course we need a big health bar for the boss at the bottom so that the player knows how low they are. The pumpkin will also decide to jump on you after performing 4 moves so that it just doesn't stay in one place for the entirety of the fight. After killing the pumpkin, we needed a little victory screen. I quickly made something very simple, and here it is. Made a death screen as well, since nothing really happened when you died and you had no way to restart the game. I also got the game over to a friend to playtest the game blindly, and he was completely clueless and didn't know what to do. Planting the crops was self-explanatory, but it wasn't obvious that you had to plant a few plants early on, and he ended up planting tomatoes in the whole field and ended up dying. So I had to quickly make a tutorial that explains what to do, specifically to say be careful not to plant too many plants too early. The game is missing one thing though, music. And I didn't have $200 lying around to buy FL Studio, so I had to go for something a lot cheaper. And by cheap I mean free. And I used a website called Beatbox, which was pretty easy to use, and managed to make a little chill track. I also wanted the music to be adaptive, so I added a more intense track that would play when you start a fight, and one more for the boss. But yeah, that's the gameplay complete. I added a main menu and added credits to thank everyone who worked on the game. And finally I published the game 5 hours early. After the jam ended, it was time to play some other submissions and rate them. I wasn't ready for the reviews though. People really loved the game. The game was very replayable. Some played it for hours, and they loved the concept and had a great time. There were certainly some issues though, like the first stages are kind of boring because the tomato is nothing special. A lot of people complain that the game is awfully quiet, which is completely on me, and I can 100% fix that. But to top it all off, so many people were asking me to make a full release on this game, but I don't think I'm that experienced to manage a game of a larger scale, because that needs a lot of careful planning, because you can do something wrong and completely mess up the game. But I am definitely thinking of working on a full game, but I will need some time, and I want to work on a little more smaller projects for now, and when I think I'm ready, I'll start making a devlog series maybe. I will make post-jam updates as well as add new content to the game, and the jam has not ended as of recording this video, so if you would like to see the results and how I improve the game based on feedback, then as always, like and subscribe to my channel, and the game will be linked in the description below, and thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.